Greetings. This is Naya Tai with National Network View. Greetings. This is Naya Tai with National Network View. Tonight, our guest, Tony Muhammad, will share his perspective on Florida Dept. of Education's proposed civics and history curriculum changes in schools and its impact on Black and Latino children. Before we get into those top news, let's do a recap of the current events we've covered recently. On yesterday's show, NNV News anchor Tariq X was joined by weekly contributor Nina Shabazz and guest Regional Student Minister Abdul Halim Mohammed in a discussion on urban planning, urban revitalization, sustainability, and mitigation of gentrification.
And so we see that the influx of business industries, we see a lot of titans of industry moving their corporations. Elon Musk moving Tesla to Houston. Why is Houston so hot right now, in your assessment?
But, Houston still remains the petrochemical energy capital of the world. This also is the home of the Johnson Space Center, the largest medical center in the world. And in the Austin, San Antonio area, the hill country, as it's called, it's now been transformed into the Silicon Hills, led basically by Dell Industries, and of course the universities and private and public investment. There are low corporate taxes here. There's no state income tax here in Texas. Texas is a right-to-work state, meaning you don't have to belong to a union in order to work in certain industries. It's a deregulated industry. Actually, this state is anti-federalist.
Tariq X and guest, Regional Student Minister Abdul Halim Mohammed, discussed Florida Dept. of Education proposed curriculum changes on teaching civics and history.
So, why is the Florida Department of Education making such changes to its curriculum?
It's part of a national movement, which is against what they call critical race theory, which simply is to say that they want to make little Johnny and Mary, their white children, feel guilty about the racist past and inequitable past of America. And so they are changing the curriculum, once again, to whitewash the history, just like we just found out about the Tulsa massacre and all the other massacres that took place, particularly post-Reconstruction and during the 20th century. So they're trying to spare their children the guilt that they should feel and must feel because of the injustice done to darker people and even their own poor whites in this country.
Nefta Freeman discussed U.S. President Biden's comments during the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre and the implications of his administration policies toward the African world.
President Biden spoke in Tulsa, Oklahoma on the 100th anniversary commemoration of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Why has Biden been the first U.S. president to recognize the massacre and make public comments?
Mm-hmm. The short answer is straight up political opportunism. I think there's a number of factors that go into this opportunity that give them, to want to make them compelling to go do this. One is that Tulsa, in particular, has been raised up because people know it as, and it's been lifted up as Black Wall Street. And then, there's a number of things we could say about that in terms of why that's so important to African people or Black people, being lifted up as self-sufficient and all that. There's some myths there, but that's besides the point. The point is that also we're in a time of economic crisis of the United States. The United States is leading around the world, and so what some of us refer to as the race to the bottom.
NNV News anchor Rosalind Park was joined by weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad, who expounded on the catastrophic damage left by the Israeli airstrikes of Palestinian-occupied territories.
After 11 days of Israeli airstrikes and bombardment, the Palestinian occupied territories, including the West Bank and Gaza, have been decimated. What types of infrastructures have been damaged or destroyed by the airstrikes?
Well, all civilian infrastructure. We're talking hospitals, schools, Palestinian residences, businesses, and even the offices, which usually the media is off limits to these things, but the offices of Al Jazeera, as well as the Associated Press, were destroyed. According to many of the analysts who are doing these assessments afterwards and looking at the level of destruction, they're saying it's going to take literally years, for these things to be rebuilt and for the city to come back, the cities to come back.
Brian E. Muhammad also gave more information to Rosalind about the conflict as they discussed the lopsided death tolls of 300 Palestinians to 12 Israelis and the Biden administration's unwavering allegiance to Israel through its billions of dollars in financial and military aid.
Nearly 300 Palestinians have been killed, as we discussed briefly in the last segment, and a dozen Israelis killed. Why is the death toll so unequal?
Because Israel have been given the weapons of America. Israel also have devalued Palestinian life. And when you have no value for the next human being, then you will stop at nothing. You don't care about the numbers. You don't care about the lopsidedness of how you respond. In Islam, we don't believe in just turning the other cheek. The Holy Quran allowed for retaliation under circumstances. But the Holy Quran also balances that by not allowing us to exceed the limits, even in warfare. So if you kill 10 of mine, I'm not allowed to kill 30 of yours.
Vernon Muhammad updated us on what's new on the blockchain, the changing global financial situation, and financial education.
And what do these movements mean for the existing global financial systems?
What we see going on in several different areas, you see a shift. You think of America and how much of a powerhouse it has been over the years. Well, there's a struggle for dominance now. If you look at China, if you look at the European Union, you look at some other developing nations, everyone is realizing that, hey, since 1971 at least, we've been dependent on the US dollar. What you're starting to see now is different countries are starting to maneuver themselves so that they can establish their own dominance. And as things move from just the physical US dollar to digital currency, you have more people taking advantage. You have more nations and institutions taking advantage of blockchain, taking advantage of Bitcoin, Ethereum, as well as, like China is doing, their own central bank issued digital currency.
NNV News anchor Rosalind Parks spoke with weekly contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad on the recent lawsuit filed by employees at Methodist Hospital in Houston, Texas, and its relations to violations of the Nuremberg Code.
What is your view of the suit that the Methodist employees have penned against their employer?
I noticed that there was an aura in Methodist that they considered themselves one of the best. And I would agree with that. They are probably one of the best in the medical center. But I'm saying that because the confidence and the aura that the employees of an institution have is a large part of the success of that institution. And I think it's very interesting that the pro-vaccine ideology calls everybody else, lead-headed. They're not open-minded. But in reality, if you have people that work in the healthcare field and have been doing so for many years, and there are a certain percentage right now, there are estimates from 50 to 60% of the healthcare workers across the country are either against or very concerned about getting the vaccine. Why would that not be taken in consideration?
The numbers of adverse reactions and deaths associated with the COVID-19 vaccines, along with the accuracy of the VAERS reporting system, also came up in Rosalind's conversation with Dr. Akili.
Dr. Akili, what are your thoughts on the data that has been recently reported stating that 70% of Californians have had their first shot? And according to the CDC, 50% of Americans have been fully vaccinated.
When the vaccines were first being introduced to the society and when they were supposedly being made in these companies and they were about ready to be sent out to the public, there was a huge concern on how millions of people were going to get vaccinated. The system doesn't have the capability to do that. And so when we look at the fact that we have been vaccinating people since December, 50% of America is approximately 170 million people. And we have to understand that J&J was kind of behind the Moderna and the Pfizer. And then there was a period of time where they suspended it, right? So we're talking about a lot more people that are taking the vaccine that necessitate 2 shots. So we're really talking about a lot of manpower, a lot of vaccinations that it would take to vaccinate 170 people.
Dr. Akili addressed the concerns over the youth now being added to the COVID-19 vaccination trials and the risk of administering COVID-19 vaccines to children.
Children as young as 6 months are being selected for COVID vaccination trials. Is this safe?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there has been enough time for us to truly understand and come to a conclusion on what's happening in adults. And of course, as most people have seen within this last month, it's been approved for, 12 to 15 year range. So for them to already have dropped the number to 6 months, and then again, it hasn't been approved yet for approval, it's still in the emergency use phase. It just really doesn't make a lot of sense to me because the generation that's lower than 15 didn't really have a lot of cases. It really wasn't a large population that was having a lot of struggles with the COVID infection.
On a special broadcast, NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad highlighted the 64 years of the ministry of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Student Minister Demetric Muhammad, a member of the NOI research team, discussed this milestone and helped highlight the impact the minister has made throughout the years.
So, Brother Demetric, it was actually you who brought this idea to me to have this show, and you, from your research, discovered this is the 64th anniversary of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan being a minister. So, why is it significant for us to highlight this milestone in his life?
Minister Willie, I think that this is a great occasion for us in the Nation of Islam and as a people. For when you go throughout Black America, and quite frankly, the world, all you have to do is say 2 words, the minister, and one man comes to mind. And that is, of course, our beloved teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So he has worn a moniker or a title for 64 years. And that is a word that defines a servant. Some dictionaries say a minister is a servant to a king.
Let us pause for announcements from our sponsors. When we return, Tony Muhammad will be on to discuss the Florida governor banning critical race theory and other curriculum changes being made in schools. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
As educational institutions change civics and history curriculum, there are growing concerns over the impact that will have on the minds of Black and Latino children.
Critical race theory is a phrase circulating in academia and now among several conservative lawmakers nationwide who are saying publicly they're against it. But before we look at why they're pushing back on CRT, it's important we first all understand what it is. It started with civil rights leaders as a way to examine certain laws created to oppress people of color and has evolved into an exploration of how racism impacts all professions. That's according to two psychologists writing a book on critical race theory. Governor Ron DeSantis wants to ban it from being taught in Florida schools. In March, he called it an unsubstantiated theory. Instead, he wants to invest $106 million in civics curriculum. But the Lee County NAACP president, James Milwaukee, says the country hasn't made enough progress to do away with critical race theory, also known as CRT.
We are not at a point yet in America where America is race neutral, or we're living in a colorblind society.
Joining us to discuss this is Tony Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum, my dear sister.
Wa alaikum salam. How are you doing today, brother Tony?
All praise is due to Allah, doing well.
Yes, sir. Good to hear. So we're going to jump into our first question. The Florida Department of Education is proposing changes to their civics and history curriculum in schools. What type of changes are being proposed? What potential impact would such curriculum changes have on the minds of Black and Latino children in public schools?
Well, the changes that are being not just proposed, but they're being implemented has to do with the instilling of patriotism. Every 10, 15 years, conservative forces tend to do this in education, and they've been doing it throughout the country, where they're concerned that young people are straying away from patriotism, and so now they're implementing more. How can I put it? They're trying to reinforce patriotism more and more and more, instead of truly addressing the problems that we are experiencing as a society and as a world, as far as it goes in relation to us experiencing white supremacy, racism, and experiencing it on all levels in our society. Instead of teaching children how to confront and deal with these situations, they're trying to do away with even the idea that it even exists by implementing this curriculum on this super patriotism, which that's not going to amount to anything. The effect that's going to have on Black and Latino children that experience racism from the time that they begin public school, from the time that they're interacting with other students and with teachers, and they see that something is not right, when they hear their parents talking about them being pulled over by police, or them actually seeing it themselves, seeing them, their parents being brutalized by police or harassed by police, and hearing those kind of discussions, experiencing racism in this country, as children, Black and brown children, experience it more and more and more and more, but yet they see that those kind of issues are not being discussed in schools, and they are not allowed to even confront those kind of discussions. All it's going to do is alienate these children more and more. And I've experienced it in the classroom myself.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your answer. And what has brought about a national movement to change the educational curriculum, including removing the critical race theory from being taught in schools?
Well, the first thing about critical race theory is, like, we got to get rid of the theory part behind it, because it's not theory. There is a fact that we are experiencing racism and white supremacy, and we are experiencing Black and brown inferiority. That's number one. White people and conservative forces in this country for a very long time, really since the 90s, they've been forming their own coalitions to reform public education and the type of message that they want to instill on the minds of children. Not just do Black and brown children suffer, but also white children suffer, because here we have the reinforcement of white supremacy in the school system. If there's going to be any kind of resolve in this country when it comes down to racism, white supremacy, white people themselves have to confront their own racism and white supremacy. So the solution to all of that, we ourselves have to form our own coalitions and combat the forces that are against us, that have our young children, young Black and brown children, look down upon themselves, and not be able to see themselves in the curriculum. See, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has taught us that the most powerful thing to anyone when a picture is taken is for that person to be able to see themselves in a picture, because then you start seeing the person really get happy, and they see themselves in that picture, like, oh, there I am. But in civics education, if young people don't see themselves, I'm speaking particularly about our children, Black and brown children, if they don't see themselves in the curriculum, if they're hearing all of this theory, and they're hearing all of these concepts that really go over their heads, and they don't see themselves, and what's being attempted to instill in them is patriotism, they're not going to get it, and they're not going to even make an attempt to get it. Black psychologists have historically found that when it comes down to Black, and particularly Mexican and Puerto Rican children in this country, they don't view their culture as being necessarily opposite of that of white people, but more so against the dominant culture. And so very quickly, they're going to shut down. They're not going to be tuning in, and they're not going to receive anything of substance from a civics education. They're not going to, when the student is tuned out of anything that is being taught in the classroom, they'd have nothing to benefit. It'll require for us as Black and Latino educators, if you will, that are really conscientious and want to do something about it, to step in and show young people, young Black and brown children, how the curriculum is, how it relates to them, really. Same thing goes for history. Same thing goes for anything that is being taught. Mathematics, because we're the authors of mathematics. When you're dealing with history, there have already been, for the past 20, 30 years, efforts in places like Arizona, in Texas. They've already attempted to whitewash the curriculum, if you will, to a degree where they would brand the slave trade as being a triangular trade, and that Black people were brought here to help white people build this country. And they don't want any kind of discussion about slavery or any ills that took place, any kind of savagery that took place during slavery, and what kind of effect it had on Black people and the indigenous people. Because to do so now, it would be considered to be inciting rebellion on the part of young people. No, when the truth is being hidden from our children, anger settles in inside, and then they just not only rebel from the system, but also from their parents, and they start rebelling against all of the things that are around them, that some of them may be, the intention may be good, but really they're perceiving as everybody being against them. And that's the condition of many of our young people today. I'm sorry for going off on a tangent, dear sister.
Oh no, no time. Yes, sir. We appreciate having you here as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you, man.
But no, I can attest to that. I witnessed it with my own two eyes. And that kind of brings us to our next question. Are the proposed curriculum changes likely to reinforce Black inferiority and promote white superiority? If so, how?
Absolutely. Just dealing with my own students, and I mentioned it just a few minutes ago. The reality of the condition of our young people is that they don't see themselves in the curriculum because it was never designed for them. It was never designed for their benefit. So as a result, they suffer. They're not gaining anything from any kind of knowledge about the law, because it's not being taught to them how it corresponds to them, how it relates to them. When I've stepped in and I've taught civics education, I've always taught it from an angle where I show them the law and how it corresponds to their everyday reality. If we're not, as educators, if we're not taking the time to show children how it corresponds to their everyday reality, and part of it is dealing with racism and white supremacy and confronting our own Black and brown inferiority. If we ourselves are, if we're not reflecting on our own condition, if young people are not made to reflect on their own condition and how to improve their own condition, then in truth, it just goes over their heads. And when you're talking about any kind of topic of justice, really it becomes like a short circuit in the brain, because our young people are not perceiving anything in regards to them experiencing any kind of justice, or Black and brown people experiencing any justice, especially when after just a year-long pandemic right now that we've experienced, a year plus really, when we saw the country experience a wave of protests as a result of not just the killing of George Floyd, but multiple Black people, and Latinos are also suffering, and other brown people are also suffering. Young people see this. And so if you're talking to them about the way that a justice system works, or the way that laws are passed and how all of this is meant to benefit them, no, they themselves they're going to shut down, because they don't see how it's really all working. We need a new education for ourselves, by ourselves, that will work for us. And we do need conscientious educators to speak the truth, to be courageous enough to speak the truth, and to present these these realities to young people and how they themselves can participate in their own justice in their own communities.
Yes, sir, I agree. We definitely need our own new education system. We need to set that up as soon as possible. Yes, sir. Now, are the proposed curriculum changes part of a larger national effort to censor critical thinking and eliminate historical controversy? And is the national effort put forth really to promote real history or a patriotic myth?
It's a patriotic myth. Every country has its myths that's taught in its educational systems, and America is filled with them. I'm going to give one example. Every year the country celebrates the independence of this country on July 4th, but in truth, the the Declaration of Independence wasn't signed on July 4th. It started to be signed on July 2nd, and then it took several months for the Declaration of Independence to be signed by who are known as the founding fathers. So, but a lot of Americans don't know this, including white people. They don't know those realities. And so a lot of myths are taught for the purpose of trying to unify the country, but not unify really black and brown. We've always been against, typically we've been against what has been taught because we don't see ourselves and we don't see how the curriculum is meant to benefit us. As I said, we ourselves, we have to develop curriculum for ourselves. I've met with a group in Liberty City earlier this week. Liberty City here in Miami is the area where we have Muhammad Mosque number 29, the 7th regional headquarters. And in that very community, we have some of the lowest literacy rates. We have some of the worst educational conditions as far as our children go. And so we're developing a literacy program. We're developing a STEM program dealing with the education of Black scientists, Black inventors, so that our young people could see more of themselves when it comes down to science and technology, and not just sports and entertainment, which is predominantly on the minds of our young people today.
Yes, sir. And now we are going to take a short break and we will be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
Okay, and now we are back with Tony Muhammad. All right, yes, sir. So I have two more questions for you.
Yes, ma'am.
This question and answer right now. I love how well versed you are in this, and a lot more of us need to be well versed in this. Black, brown, white, Hispanic, all of us need to be. So just 2 more questions for you, and then we'll be finished.
Yes, ma'am.
In the whitewashing of history, white students have been systematically miseducated. Has the miseducation been designed to cushion white people from the guilt they might feel if confronted with the sins of their fathers?
Absolutely. And the most common response that white people give when you're talking anything about race, they start going to the whole statement, well, my I'm not responsible for slavery, or my family wasn't responsible for slavery. They came here in the beginning part of the 20th century or something like that. No, but you benefit from the system. And that's what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has taught us. There's a certain benefit that white people experience. And then so if you're reforming the curriculum in a way where the whole idea and the concept of race, or just so much so that Black people don't really see any true, real issues being discussed, their reality in their own neighborhoods and in their communities, they don't see anything of value really being discussed. And so white people, especially young white people, now they're beginning to engage in the discussions because they see this reality that we are experiencing in America. When you get pulled over as a Black or brown person as by police, what will happen? There's too many incidents that are now exposed on the regular on social media that you cannot deny the fact that we experience racism and white supremacy on a large scale in this country. So the discussion will require for white people themselves to engage in any kind of in discussion if there is any form of reconciliation or redemption or any form of true justice to take place in the future of America. But in truth, it doesn't look like things are headed in that direction. It looks like the more that in racial injustice is exposed in America, the more these forces band up and work together to try to make things even more patriotic, and they try to conceal more and more of the history of savagery that we have experienced in this country. As Student Minister Abdul Halim Muhammad expressed when he was interviewed by NNV News, that is just right now, the majority of the country is now getting hip with the story of Black Wall Street being destroyed by what really it was a large scale white mob there in Tulsa, Oklahoma. These kind of discussions need to be exposed on the regular through education, and it's only through education, through really seriously sitting down and analyzing how we have suffered in this country, how particularly Black and brown people have suffered, even how other groups of people have suffered, including some white people, because this country really was not designed for the benefit of all white people. It was originally designed only for wealthy white people. And these are some realities that all people need to confront if America would be really moved in the direction of becoming a great nation. But in truth, we're not nowhere near on that level right now.
Absolutely, yes, sir. And I truly, personally believe that these are things that we need to discuss in schools, in public schools and private schools. Everybody needs to know about these things because a lot of children and a lot of grown folks now, they just really don't know. So this is our last question now. What
Yes,
is a
ma'am.
more effective way of teaching civics education and history to Black, Latino, and other non-white students? Should the educational curriculum for Black and Latino children include nation building?
Absolutely. As I said earlier, as conservative whites are creating their own coalitions, we should form our own coalitions ourselves. And when it comes down to our young people, Black and brown young people, that nation building does not begin after they graduate high school. That's way too late. What I teach in the classroom to young people is that whatever they envision themselves as doing in life, they should always have it in mind to, number one, become entrepreneurs. Even if they want to get involved in the medical profession or become teachers or whatever profession they want to get into, start networking with people in these fields now as middle school students. To find out how they can volunteer their time and find out the ins and outs of businesses, the ins and outs of schools, the ins and outs of hospitals. And so they'll know how these operate and how they work. Start studying now that we have time as young people. I try to give them examples throughout history, how some of the greatest generals in history, they didn't start as adults when they were like 20, 21. Many of them started when they were 13, 14, even younger than that in some cases. See, the future of any nation lies within the youth. And so as educators, that nation building begins in the classroom with young people, have them learn how to collaborate with one another when it comes down to the development of projects. That the student needs to see themselves as being part of something larger and not just simply have them come home and play video games, although we do need our recreational time, of course, but expose our young people. We are, as adults, as parents, we need to take the time to expose our young people about the broader reality, the broader idea of seeking to unite our people. Like I said earlier, like right now, there are little coalitions being formed here in the Black community in Miami, where we're devoting ourselves to the re-education of our young people. And so nation building begins there. And we have to, as adults, we need to develop educational and employment systems where when young people graduate from high school, they already have a job waiting for them. And as employers, we're already investing in their education, sending them to college and having them engage in alternative type of educational programs where they develop the skills to help build a whole new infrastructure to our communities.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for sharing these gems with us. And on behalf of
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for deciding to be a part of the show. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, my sister.
Yes,
May Allah bless you.
May Allah bless you as well. And thank you all for joining us today and tuning into National Network View News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Naya Tai with National Network View News.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.